Hi everybody, it's Martin here from Branco Customs, and today I'm going to give you a little insight as to how I make my custom bowstrings. So for compound bows, I tend to use BCY number 452X on the string material, BCY Halo 14 thou on the servings, on the end servings, and then I tend to use BCY number 62XS for the center serving. Okay, so before we kick off, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about me and my experience making strings. I started shooting archery most seriously probably in 1994, so probably about 30 years ago. Um, and that was just when I was sort of 11 years old and doing it as after school. That lasted for a few months, and then I started getting into 3D shooting. So from then on in, it was 3D archery every weekend. Thank God to my mum for the willingness to take me to all the different shoots, and my brother as well. But generally, yeah, I shot amateurly for a long time. But then it wasn't long before I started making my own strings back then. And it literally started with a board with a couple of nails in it. And I had varying success. But generally, I forget exactly when it was. It got to a point where I ended up being sponsored by Bowtech for a while. And with that came Winner's Choice custom bowstrings discounts and things like that. So I used those for a while and everything was fine. But then eventually I started working in the archery industry back in 2010, where me and my wife both started working at the archery company in England. And we did that for 10 years. And for 10 of those 10 years, I was chief bowstring maker and bowstring fitter and bow tuner and all the rest of it. And in that time, I went from having some experience to being probably one of the most educated people in the UK about making bowstrings and fitting them to bows. And since I left England, I've now been doing pretty much the same thing here in Portugal, less of the fitting, but more of the making and sending the strings out all over the world. So basically, I have done loads of strings primarily for compound. That's been my speciality. Crossbows as well, of course, and recurves and longbows, traditional type things. Um, Basically, if it's got a string on it, then I've probably made a string for it, including horse bows and all those sorts of things. So I'm going to show you some of the methods that I do to make a compound string. The way that I do it is not the quickest, it's not the easiest, it's probably one of the most labor intensive, but I believe it gives you the best quality string, the least chance of any peep twist, which is exactly what everybody wants, and of course no creep and stretch and things like that, but just leaves you with a quality string that you can put your bow away, and whenever you pull it back out, it shoots the same as it did last time, which is the most important. So let's get stuck in. Okay, so here's a quick look at my setup. I've basically got a pneumatic stretcher here. I've got my string jig posts and then the twister at this end. All of this I built it myself. The same with other equipment I've used in the past professionally. There's obviously commercial versions of the same thing, but with my history in engineering and design, it wasn't too much to whip this up, and it works extremely well and is a bit more durable, may I say, than some of the commercially available models, which is good because you can stretch things and things don't bend and break, etc. So other than that, I tend to use the outer limit serving jigs and the little serving machine. And as I said before, one of the most important things is decent materials. So everything I use is BCY, right from the Halo serving, which is an absolute fortune. And then one of the real key ingredients is having the aluminium serving jigs, I think from Specialty Archery. These ones I've had them for a good while, but if you try making decent strings and you're just running straight from the plastic spools, good luck to you, because they will be causing your peep twist and all sorts of other problems. So let's go. Okay, so I just had an order in for a Prime Logic CT5. I need to make the whole set, but for today we're just going to make the main string. So generally I use my string drawings here, available from the manufacturer. However, it's really important to know that it is possible, and a lot of the time, the strings that are on the bow do not fit the manufacturer's drawing. So you never know if your bow has ever been adjusted by a pro shop in order to fit you perfectly, or to do something in order to manipulate the settings on it. Or sometimes the bows coming out of the factory is just plain do not match the drawings. Sometimes it can only be 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, but that's enough that when you receive your new strings, you go, ooh, especially compounded with the fact that if someone's strings have been on their bow for a year or 2 years, you never know, and they've stretched in that time, sometimes quite considerably. When you get your new ones, you find that they're, 1/4 or 1/2 an inch shorter than what you've just taken off the bow. Then things are going to be different on that bow. It could change quite a lot of things. So the very best way is, if you've got the time before ordering a set, take those strings off your bow and measure those, fill out one of my string forms from my website, and then I can make you a new set that match what you've taken off your bow. Because if you want your bow to shoot the same as it did before you change the strings, then we need to know what you're starting with. But generally, if you want a completely fresh start, then we can go off the manufacturer's specs easily enough. So anyway, having said that, imagine we want to make a string that's 28.45 inches long. I've got another chart here which I've used forever, which basically we're between 28 and 29 inches. Means we need to add about 0.215 of an inch to that 28.45, and then lay it out at that. And then that's probably going to need about 19 twists in order to get it to the right length. So here we go. Okay, so I measure from the post there, and what we're going to need is basically 28.65. So it's going to be there. This client wants a purple bowstring, so we're going to be using this 452X for this one. And the way that I generally start is I hook the string tightly under there and then start going around anti-clockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 22, 23, 24. Okay, so we laid out 24 strands here, and generally we want to divide them into 2 halves on the post, so there's a little bit of a gap in the middle. We'll peel back that original one and then cut the other one free from the spool. So here we got 2 ends, and what we do is a reef knot onto those. A reef knot is basically right over left and under, left over right and under, and then that cinches down nice and tight. But you've got to make sure that as you're laying out all of these strands and as you're pulling all of those knots tight, you're keeping the string tension extremely balanced between each one of those strands. Any one of them goes tighter or looser than the next one, and your string is rubbish. Okay, so now that's done, we can squeeze those together, pull the strands out to the side, slide a bit of wax on them and on the sides there. Very nice. Now here is where the hard work begins. So in order to complete these, we basically now whip the end loop. So we'll go round one way, round the other way, and get both of those pulled up tight, either side of that knot. And then it's basically a case of repeating that process over and over and over again. Each time you lay down another pass or another loop over, you basically try to overlay half of the previous loop. So you're forming quite a strong double layered end serving. Okay, so it's really important that each loop is pulled really tight and pushed down as you do it. And then when you come to the end, split the bundle in half and feed it through. Pull it back down, split what's left in half, feed it through, and pull it back down. And the same for the other side. Okay, so that end loop is now served. And what we do is move on and do the other end. By adding the wax on here, it allows each one of these knots to pull down a little bit tighter than you would do if you didn't put the wax on there. So you end up with a nice tight end loop that's really cinched down. Okay, so you can see here why I say this is not the fastest or the easiest method for doing strings. A lot of people do served end loops. And there's nothing wrong with served end loops, but in my experience, this method leaves you with a higher quality string with less chance of getting any peep twist, and it helps to reduce any imbalances within the string or cable. So the reason why I feel like it's that way is because this string is laid out in this position and it's served in this position. Nothing has to move. The next step, it basically goes from this onto the stretcher, gets stretched, twisted, served, and that's it. It leaves you with a dead string with no built up tensions or imbalances in it. Whereas for comparison, if you were to build this in the same way that you would do a recurve string, where you lay these out the other way and you serve it sideways, you then have to turn it around and reposition it all. Each time you do that, if you have a slight imbalance in how the jig's set or whether there's more tension on one side of the bundle than the other, you're just letting yourself in for potential problems. Now, obviously, I may be splitting hairs here, but I believe in it enough that I put my hands through absolute torture, tightening every single one of these knots and cinching it down. And you know what? I found this method that works for me, and it seems to work for all of my customers as well. So that's what I'm sticking with. The only times that I do obviously served in loops is on recurve strings and things like that, where it's no problem at all because I don't have peep sights, and it's a bit of a different beast altogether. And other than that, I use them on cables sometimes. A lot of the PSE bows, actually the string loop on some of those rotates around the string peg on a certain part of those cams, which causes an awful lot of friction and abrasion, where a served end loop is actually quite advantageous compared to this method. And other than that, whenever I do split yoke systems, the two yokes at the top of the idler wheels, for example, I always serve those as well, because again, why not? It's nice and durable and it doesn't interfere with anything. So we're almost finished with this stage, and then we'll get it onto the stretcher. One more really important thing to do at this stage is not to forget to mark where the peep sight goes. So we've marked the center of the string bundle. On this one, it's obviously center of the string straight through there. However, when I do it for a multicolored string, then I make sure that obviously you put it between the two colors instead. So in the back of my workshop's where I keep the air compressor, which is what feeds the stretcher. So we'll crank this on up to the right pressure. So now we're going to transfer this string onto the other part of the machine. So we'll slacken this off. Attach one end onto there. remove those. Then we make sure this is really tight, because you don't want to be around if this thing comes loose. And we'll stretch this pretty much into position. And there we go. He's now under 400 pounds of tension. So we'll go back to my chart here. If I remember correctly, we need about 19 twists on this one. Then take a special little tool here. We go through between the two halves of this string. And we'll separate it all the way down. And this really helps to balance both sides of the string evenly. Okay, so the next thing is to burnish the string. So we can take some of the string material that we used, wrap it around here, pull it tight. We basically, this does a couple of things. It scrapes off all the excess wax. It makes the string circular, and it allows the perfect diameter for your serving to then bite down on without having to get held off by all the wax and everything there. So make sure that your serving goes on nice and tight and will stay tight. Okay, so at this point, once it's stretched, you need to verify your length. So that's under 400 pounds of tension, and that's under none. So you can see just how much difference that makes. Now, the way you measure these correctly to the ATA standard is measuring them under 100 pounds of tension, which we do. And then once you got your length perfectly correct, then we go on to the serving. Okay, so here's where we set the loop length. This is the main string on a prime bow, so it's got ginormous loops in order for those string donuts to run through it. And keep all the tag ends to one side, and then start laying down and pulling that loop nice and tight. Now, it's at this point you need to have some experience with setting the tension on your serving jig. Now, that's not something I can really tell you a specific number, but experience will tell you that after a while, a little bit too loose, things will come apart. A little bit too tight, and you're going to start inducing all sorts of peep twist and other horrible things that can end up making your string all zigzaggy and things like that. Or you could start serving and then all of a sudden partway through you're snapping it off if you got it too tight. So it really is a balancing act, and a lot of it depends on the resistance within your individual serving jig and the type of serving that you're using. Okay, and again on this string, there's not really much end serving. A lot of bows, this will be 15 or 16 inches long, but with this one, it's only a few inches. So anyway, we chop off a tail end of this main serving. And the way that I do it is I measure all my loops to exactly the length that I need them. And then I take some back off again. I then take a piece of string material in a loop and put that serving back over the loop. Feed the tag end through the loop and pull it back. I'll then use my trusty Gorilla Grip Allen keys, wrap that around there, and then cinch that knot nice and tight, but again, not too tight. It's all the thing you got to get a bit of a feel for. And the final ends, they get trimmed off. all the while being very careful, obviously, that you don't nick an actual strand that you want. And then you get your trusty lighter and melt that off. Be sure to leave a little ball on the end of it, then it can't pull back through. So there's one end, all done. Beautiful. The other important thing to note is that serving direction is extremely important. You want to be laying this serving across the rotation of the twists, not with the rotation of the twists. Okay, so next we're going to do the string stop serving. So we need a mark 17.5, one at 19.5, 17.5, and the other here at 19.5. Same as before, going against the twist in the string, I put one string loop around like that, and then I go back over that first one, and then try and hold that still whilst you get a few more on there. Okay, now that's going. We run it up to about a dozen, and then I get on the end of that tag end and I wrap it up in my Allen keys again. You see them coming in the frame here, and give that knot a good cinch down. You can see it just tightening a little bit there. Now that makes all the difference. So many people, you would not believe, that they make strings and they just do not make the ends of the serving tight enough. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, things start separating and unraveling. So here I hold that tag end tight until I get to my other mark. And then tie that off in the same manner that I did before. Okie dokie, so you can see here that I've finished the center serving, which again brings me to another important point, is when you order a string from me, let me know what nocks you use, and wherever possible I'll try and get your knock fit as perfect as I can. I generally keep a good collection of knocks, so you know, there's a big variety. Like a bowhunter is you know, perfect with this 0.21 serving, but you go to something smaller, like some of the little pin knocks, the small groove ones and things, they can be quite a bit tighter. So there isn't a one size fits all, and that's why custom string makers like me exist. I would much rather you give me far too much information, and I can make sure that I make your strings perfectly in every aspect first time, because the idea of sending strings out to people and then realizing that they forgot to specify something that was important is just heartbreaking. And then the final test with any bowstring is, of course, the peep sight. So you see that little bit of string that marks the peep sight position there. It's impossible to get into focus, but anyway, you'll see that when I activate and deactivate the pressure of this, that piece of string does not budge. So having that little peep sight tag end serving stay put as you increase and decrease the stretch on the string is a surefire way of knowing that you've got a good string. If, for example, you increase and decrease that tension and that thing twists, then the same thing will happen when you put it on a bow, especially a compound. Imagine you draw back and you've got lots of tension, and you come up and the tension decreases. The exact same thing happens. As the tension increases, it might twist. As it decreases, it might twist again, and you know, you just got yourself a rubbish string. But of course, I'm not infallible. You know, I learned the hard way through years and years of trial and error. Back in the day, I was on archery talk forums, you know, dozens of hours a week with other string makers, learning the ways that they were doing it, trying different things out, trying them on my own bows, sponsored archers' bows, all sorts of different processes in order to come up with a recipe that works. But anyway, don't take my word for it. I've put together a few testimonials at the end of this video from a few guys that were happy with their strings. And if you're interested in getting some from me, have a look at my website, www.brancocustoms.com, and you can find all the information you need there. If you need any more clarification or want to talk about anything, I'm always available, always contactable. Facebook Messenger, probably the easiest way to get hold of me, through my personal page, Martin Pearson, or Branco Customs. Or, of course, probably the best way is an email, brancocustoms@gmail.com. Thanks a lot.
Hello, Tony Weston here from the Archery Company. Just like to give you a quick shout out to the people from Branco Customs. They make particularly good bowstrings. We've been using them in the shop for years and years and years. We have many of our archers now come in and have their bows fitted with custom Branco bowstrings. And we've been delighted with how good they are. They always fit well. The specs are always bang on. They use good quality material from BCY, and we get no string creep, no peak twist. The strings settling very quickly, and because of the way they're made, they are very nice and easy to shoot. Good quality, nice forgiveness to them, and so on. So great value for money, and we would highly recommend them. So if you're looking for a new set of bowstrings, look to Branco Customs. Absolutely fantastic product. Shoot well.
Hi, I'm John, Branco Customs shooter, traditional archer, and I've been shooting Branco strings for years now, ever since they started and slightly before it became Branco. This is a standard 8125, which I shoot on my Black Widow PSA. Brilliant strings, very fast, very quiet. I'll just grab this one. This is a new one that Martin just sent me. I call it a ghost string because of the colour of it. It's an amazing string. That is on my other Widow, my SA2. Brilliant quality strings. As I say, I've been shooting them for years now. They've enabled me to place quite well in local tournaments, quite well in a couple of NFAS champs as well, and they're on my hunting bows all the time when I hunt. Best strings out there. Highly recommend them.
Oh yeah, so ordered my new strings off Branco Customs, Martin Pearson, the other day. They arrived, got them fitted on the bow nicely, got to pick the colour for me and everything. Matches the bow quite well, I think. So got a bit of grip tuning at 70 metres, 345 going arrow, 315 feet per second, I think, somewhere around there. Looks pretty good to me. Ready for Serbia with Team GB at the end of September.
Hi, my name is Angelino. I've been shooting Branco custom bowstrings ever since I started shooting a treadbow, and they are a great string, well made, great quality, and it lasts a ton of time. I've had great success with them, both hunting and in competition.